Hey folks, this is Clayton Collins, CEO at HW Media and your host for the Housing News Podcast. I'm really excited about this episode, and our guest today deserves a really big drum roll. We have the CEO of the National Association of REALTORS, Mr. Bob Goldberg, on Housing News today. Bob talks about a big announcement that he and his team, his leadership team at the National Association of REALTORS recently made, and gives us a little glimpse into that decision-making process. But you have to listen to the episode for full details. Bob also talks about the current housing market, which we're navigating. We've seen some pretty tough changes in the last year and a half. And Bob talks about how that's impacting realtors and home buyers alike, and really goes into some survey data that he and his team have uncovered in their annual member profile survey. Some phenomenal information there. Bob also talks about some of the proposed changes and ideas that he has for the housing industry to make our industry even more resilient and sustainable and accessible for first-time and repeat home buyers. I hope you enjoy this conversation today with Mr. Bob Goldberg, CEO of the National Association of REALTORS.
We may have just gotten back from Gathering of Eagles, but we're not done with events for 2023 yet. This October, we're headed right back to Austin, Texas for HousingWire Annual, and we want to see you there. We've got a power-packed agenda with content such as our Women of Influence speakers, peak performer playbooks, CEO playbooks, and more to propel your company forward, as well as a bunch of networking events. Because this event is open to real estate executives, mortgage, title, and everyone in between, you really have the opportunity to network with people from all across the housing ecosystem. If you want to learn more about the event, or if you're already ready to get registered, head over to HousingWire.com on the events tab and you can learn all about it. Not to mention, if you're an HW Plus member, you're going to get 50% off your ticket. So get registered for HW Plus and get registered for the event so we can see you out in Austin.
So, Bob, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Housing News. I'm thrilled to have you today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Clayton. Always my honor and privilege to be a part of the incredible work that you guys do.
I appreciate that. And I have to give the audience a little bit of glimpse into scheduling these podcasts. We actually started talking about this episode before some pretty big news came out of your organization, the National Association of REALTORS, in late June. Bob, congratulations on the announcement of your retirement.
Well, I'm glad you thanked me. I don't think my wife is so happy about it, but no, yeah, it was a monumental decision after 28, 29 years here with NAR as a senior executive, CEO for about 7 years, but in the industry about 40 years, and been able to see and live through all kinds of changes, both turbulent and but all that have opportunity that I've seen. You know, it's funny, Clayton, that when I started in this industry many years ago, I started with a major MLS vendor who is now morphed into a different named company. But I'll tell you an interesting thing. You know, back in those days, it sounds like an old guy. That we'd say, you know, the next 5 years are going to be the most transformative in the industry. And then that changed. Well, the next 3 years are going to be. And in the last couple of years, it's been, you know, the next couple of months are going to be the most transformative in this industry. I think that's just indicative of just the rapid transformation that's occurring in all industries and then technology. And we're certainly one of the ones that have been impacted, but really led the way in that area. So something that I'm ultimately looking forward to, but feel that that I've been part of something that has really transformed the way real estate is conducted in this country and worldwide.
Yeah, the speed of change and the speed of innovation is certainly keeps accelerating, but it feels a little bit like that old saying is the days are long and the weeks are short. And it feels like change happens really quickly, but then it doesn't change that much if you look at it in the big picture, and then kind of before you know it, everything just accelerates and changes here.
Yeah, I started back in the days when I was with the large MLS vendor, a company called PRC Realty Systems, and they were the dominant player in MLS. And in those days, the MLS book was the big deal. in the
Yep.
early 80s, which to me doesn't feel like it was that long ago. But in the early 80s, when I was starting out in my career in this industry, we were publishing with PRC, I think it was about 7 million books a week. We were a major publisher. So ink on paper was a big deal. And the computer access to MLS was ancillary. We'd give that away just to be able to sell the MLS book. And that quickly transformed over a couple of years where the book went away and everything was online access. And I think at the end of the day, it has made everything far better for our members and certainly better for consumers.
That background makes a lot of sense, because I was reading about some of your history at the National Association, and I saw that when you started, you were in charge of leading the Realtors Information Network, which, if I'm correct, kind of led into being what is now Realtor.com and Move Inc. So you kind of came in with that MLS background to bring it into the National Association.
Yeah, I was on the founding team of Realtor.com. Back in 1995, when I was first being recruited to leave PRC to come to the new NAR subsidiary, Realtors Information Network. It was about this idea of putting something on what was called then the information superhighway. They wouldn't even call it the internet. And the idea was, how do we take information that's typically found on MLS systems and make it available for consumers to have unfettered access? So when we launched Realtor.com back in 1995, we were amongst the first to ever say, let's put that information out there for consumers. And the idea was actually very noble, and as it still is, which is allow consumers to get access to information that used to only be behind that firewall of MLS, and so that consumers can make their own determination. Because I always equate data with like water. It always wants to find a way to get seep through a hole and become free. And so consumers were going to get that data anyway. So let's put it out there for everyone to see. And it was a bit of heresy, to be honest with you, because some of the members would say, hold it, this was stuff that was proprietary to us, only at MLS to work with consumers. And we felt at the time, the Realtor organization, the Realtor Association, and our leaders that had great foresight to say, put it out there so that consumers can get access to it. Because at the end of the day, they're still going to need a professional, someone with the great background in real estate, understanding of communities, understanding of the housing market, to still be able to educate and consult them as consumers as to helping them in that real estate transaction process, which is still a pretty laborious process. And so at the time, it was very controversial, but you know what? We weren't the only ones doing it. Microsoft was looking at doing it. There were other players. And so Realtor.com emerged in the mid 1990s, 95 and 96, as the preeminent player. And then this little company called Zillow showed up with, their name Zillow, and they were doing it. And there were many other portals that followed. And at the end of the day, actually, that's a good thing that happened, because consumers now have access to that information. And it turns realtors into the consultation experts that they really are, and adds to the professionalism as opposed to it being just about data.
Yeah, it's changed the profession from being a gatekeeper, someone who the only way you can get access to home listings is talking to someone who happened to be on that lucky distribution list of the millions of copies of most recent listings in the MLS book, to someone who's more, to use your word, consultative and guiding consumers through a process versus gatekeeping listings. And I have to imagine in 1995 and the years that followed, there were some realtors who couldn't make that shift from being gatekeepers to true consultative leaders. Was that a challenge for professionals who didn't get where how the profession needed to evolve?
Yeah, for some, but I got to give really our members a lot of credit for those that were around then and still are today. That I think they made the leap and transition. If you think about it, Clayton, if you look at a lot of different professions that use computerization, the real estate industry has been using online MLS for years,
Yeah.
and unlike a lot of professions. So using a computer to access and using databases to say, I'm looking for A, B, and C, having the database spit out information. Even when I was in the infancy of my career in the I guess in the 80s when I started in this business, even though it was a dumb terminal where folks would use thermal paper to print out for consumers. But realtors were always ahead of that curve in the technology side back in those days. So that transition was not as difficult as one may think, other than, yes, we took the lid off of it and let consumers have direct access to it. But the beauty of it is that consumers now, as they were in the mid 1990s, were able to get real-time information on the spot, so that the data and information was real time. So if a price change was happening, if there was other information about the community or neighborhood or anything else, realtors and consumers simultaneously had access to it. So that transition wasn't as difficult. I think the biggest challenge was getting people over the hump that, like you said, you don't have to be a data geek. It's not hiding behind a wall, so that when consumers came to a realtor and to one of our members, they would be able to say, look, I found this information, because it was happening already. The difference was, in the past, consumers would drive by a property, they'd see the for sale sign, and then they'd go to the realtor to say, give me more information about it. Well, now that information is at their fingertips to help educate the consumers and to actually empower consumers, because in the end, the consumer is always going to win. And that's true with anything in consumer products. It's true with anything in today's society. So we played into it. I feel good that we facilitated that change to happen. But like I said, there were some members that weren't necessarily thrilled that that's the way the industry was going to evolve and change. But I'd rather have us do it to ourselves than have it happen to us.
100%. Yeah. It just disrupt yourself versus be disrupted, even though it didn't seem like it was really disrupting the business model. It worked. It was necessary. It elevated agents and brokers to their highest and best use. So Bob, if we fast forward, so now we're in 2023, or 28 years past this launch point of realtor.com, do you think we're moving in the right direction today from an innovation and flow of information perspective?
Oh, absolutely. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, about the consumers being the winners on this thing, the consumers are the ones that are buying and selling and transacting and investing. And so anything that we can do to help that experience become more positive and easier and less laborious, then it's something that is a success. So when I look at the years that have transpired, it has made transactions far easier because it has educated consumers. You don't need to be a real estate expert to go look to decide, what do I need to look for in a community to buy or invest, both in residential and commercial properties. And so I think it has made the entire process better. And it has also forced, like I said, our members to be better at what they do every single day. They've got to, like I said, become not only consultants to consumers, but really more educated. The more information that consumers get at their fingertips, it then requires our members to even be a step ahead of that. So that was really one of the key reasons that we created a product called RPR, Realtors Property Resource, which has hundreds of other keys of information to help educate our members even more, so that when consumers ask all those questions about information that they could readily get, but it's not all aggregated together, we provide these tools for our members as part of their dues, so that they become a better consultant with information to consumers. So I think the whole process has been better, and I'm excited about the things that are still to come with the new technologies and sophistication. I remember back in the days of MLS, we struggled with how do you get a picture of a house on the MLS system? How do you digitize that photo? And now with 360 tours and interactive, and now with AI and all the things that are available of technology, I've seen some tools that we've looked at already where you put on the mask, you put on the visors, and you get the feel and the smell of walking through a home. Now, I don't think anything ever replaces the physical walking in it, but if it makes the process more efficient and can make less time involved and more, I think everybody wins. So it's a good thing.
For existing inventory, you can't replace walking into it, but I've seen that same technology used in new high-rise condos that aren't complete yet, and new construction and office where there's going to be a major renovation to a white space. Like that artificial reality can really change kind of the architectural and new construction side of the industry where someone's buying something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, and all of us have gone through where whatever we may be buying in our lives, where someone will say to you, "Imagine this." Well,
Yeah.
you imagine it, you can see it and feel it, and I love. I mean, look at companies like Home Depot and Lowe's. You can go to their sites and say, "What will my room look like with this color paint?" The paint companies do these things. Home improvement companies do these things. I want to move my furniture around a certain way. Those don't have to be as much visualized, where you can now use technologies, like you said, to help you make decisions and things like that. And like you said, new construction projects and homes that are being built, or you want to be an investor in something. That technology, and I still want to think it's still in somewhat of its infancy.
Oh, absolutely. It has to be in its infancy. It'll definitely get bigger. So, Bob, let's shift the conversation over to the current housing market. So the last year has been challenging to say the least. We've seen rapid increase in interest rates like we've never seen before. We continue to struggle with inventory issues, and affordability is a topic that keeps coming up again and again. Can you give us an update on how the housing market is currently performing?
Well, it's interestingly a very hot market because there's so little inventory, as you mentioned. We continue to be at historic lows for inventory. I'll give you an idea. This is a startling number, and I use it sometimes, and it does floor people. There's about 1.5 plus million members today. Last year we hit an all-time peak, almost 1.6 plus million people. So still almost historically high numbers of our members. And yet the number of active listings is slightly below 1 million active listings, like right now. If you went on, what an inverted number if you think about it, that there are more members trying to sell real estate than there are active listings to sell. That tells you something right there. So thus, it's a very hot market because of the limited inventory. Now, when I say hot market, it's not a good hot market, because having limited inventory is not a good thing for consumers. There's not a lot of choice. There's not a lot of entry-level, affordable pricing for people as well. So, people that are coming out looking for their first home, very, very challenging on all that. And we have many members, I would venture to say probably well over, several 100,000 that have not experienced this kind of downturn, even though when I say hot, because with limited supply but high demand, it's tough for our members that are trying to sell, and it's especially tough for consumers. And like you said, with the nearly 3% increase in interest rates, that has thwarted a lot. And why would you, if you've got a mortgage today at one of those historic low rates, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. I mean, numbers that are unheard of. The question is, why would you give that up to go buy something else and then have another mortgage that may be double the mortgage price? So that's the challenge, and you can't just magically do this and say, please put your house up for sale because the market's so good. So I think we've got that challenging economy from a interest rate and inflation perspective that continues to thwart it. If you are someone that says, hey, I am selling, you're going to get a lot of looks in most markets. But that doesn't necessarily help you if you're trying to find your next home. So that domino effect is real. I anticipate it's going to get better. Our chief economist, Lawrence Yun, who was one of the foremost economists in the country, we still project interest rates are going to edge downward in the next year. Inventory will go up. That is actually a good thing. But it's probably, a year plus out, from all the indicators that we've seen. So, as much as I'd love to be encouraging to say it's going to pick up and skyrocket like it was before, real estate's interesting, Clayton, as I look at it. The market can be extremely hot like it was a couple of years ago, where multiple offers happen, inventory is plentiful. And then it can go to a market where there's no inventory and high interest rates. And what you really want is what I would say a normal supply, where you can go into where days on market can, even though they bumped up a bit, but not to that frenetic pace that was there a couple of years ago, where homes would go up and they'd get 5-10 offers the first couple of days. That's not necessarily a healthy market either, because it that over exuberance doesn't necessarily help everybody, and so we're seeing now a relatively strong economy, but not strong housing in terms of a bountiful amount of supply. And we work very closely with our partners in the real estate vertical, the Home Builders Association, the Mortgage Bankers, the American Bankers Association, NAR, the four major vertical players in this. And we've really been focused on how do you get more inventory? How do builders build more to meet the demand? Because there's estimates that we're still several million units short in this country. And, but there's many times in local markets, regulatory issues that prevent easy access to build. There's concern about, expansion of trying to overdevelop. So all these things thwart new construction to meet demand. And with people still not being able to easily afford another mortgage, has thwarted it. So we'd love to see more efforts. And we've been working with the federal government on this and different agencies. How do you get maybe more investment in converting unused commercial properties, maybe converting those to maybe housing projects and things like that? I've seen it in some areas where malls that used to have shopping are no longer, but they're looking at how do you convert this into housing in such a way that creates more opportunities for investment in that area. So there's a lot of things that can be done. There's just not quick, let's fix the problem tomorrow.
No, there's no quick fixes. I mean, we spent years at HousingWire saying that new home construction can't save us from an inventory issue. The velocity that which builders can bring homes to market is just too slow to solve an immediate problem. However, it is the only way to solve a long-term problem. So even though it's not fast, it has to happen. But I want to kind of come back to existing supply for a minute before we move into new home construction and talk about some of these commercial repurpose ideas. You brought up the topic of this mortgage rate lockdown theory, which at HousingWire, our own team can't agree on. Logan Motoshami, our lead analyst, has his views that lockdown is not a theory that's ever really proven out in the data. And that people, I think in Logan's words, is they they date, they mate, they get married, and they buy houses, and like life happens, and like houses are going to get bought, and people aren't going to be locked in on a mortgage rate. We have other folks in our organization who just don't see it that way and think those 2.5% rates are going to be really hard for someone to shake, even if like life circumstances determine that they need an extra room or a bigger house or a different school district. How are you thinking about that mortgage rate lockdown theory?
Well, we could all have our, economists have their theories and analysts have their theories. And then I go back to, and this is, Bob Goldberg personal opinion, of just pragmatic in life. I look at it and I say, I was telling people the story, literally, this is no exaggeration. A couple of weeks ago, I had my annual physical. Knock on wood, I'm still here. And I was talking to my doctor, and he was, he's fascinated about, what work I do. And we got into talking about housing. And he was talking about he and his wife want to move to a bigger home. And I'm thinking, well, I'm certainly contributing to helping you as your patient, and all this. And his comment to me was, my wife wants to get a bigger house with this, this, and this, and I don't want to move because I have a 3% interest rate. I'm not giving that up. I mean, just in a practical conversation. And I said, well, yeah. And I said, well, what are you going to end up doing? He goes, well, unless I can accumulate enough cash to make it so that the mortgage rate is not an issue, because people get caught up in that rate. This is what I'm paying today.
So
Yeah.
caught up. But then like
Yeah.
the businessman inside of me says, if you can't figure out a better way to like put that cash to work, then that's a whole different issue. But then like trying to save 2 points on a mortgage interest rate.
Yeah. I mean, so the practical side is we all face that today. I look at my own kids, who have, fortunately were able to have mom and dad help them out a bit, when they went to buy their first home. Most people don't have that luxury, and right off everything was, here is what I can afford, and these interest rates scare me, and in fact, um, you know, and there's nothing for me to buy that's affordable. So you put all those together. I mean, just practically, you can have all the analysts in the world talk about, well, the people still want to buy a house and all that. And yeah, that's true. Um, and the thing that is helping housing, I will tell you in all candor, is that rental rates have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And that has been something that I think is, the typical rent versus buy conversation makes it really a good discussion now to talk about. Yeah, it's a great time to buy if you could find something that's affordable, but with the appreciation rates, with the limited supply, have also created that problem. So I think that, I fall on the side of everybody lives their life. Yes, they'd love to have their own piece of the pie. But there's so many other factors today, Clayton, that, all of us, when we deal with even our own employees, when COVID happened, you had some people that made decisions to say, I want to be mobile, so I don't get locked into any one area, because I may be working for an employer that allows remote work, so I want to go work over here. All of those dynamics go into this big bowl, and you shake it up. And I don't think any of the past analytics hold the way they do today, because I don't think anyone knows the right answer on that. It has so changed all the dynamics. So, I always press Lawrence, again, one of the top economists in the world, to say, Lawrence, tell me exactly what's going to happen. And he chuckles and smiles. And, other than maybe a weatherman, economists get the luxury of not always being right. And I trust Lawrence more than I do anybody, because he's been pretty spot on. When we look at employment trends, and we look at job creation, and we look at housing creation and all that. And still, I think the effects of the pandemic and COVID and how employers are responding with remote work has changed a lot of those dynamics too.
Yeah, Lawrence better be good. He's the representing the National Association of REALTORS. He's got everybody listening, from
Yeah,
HousingWire and Real Trends to Bloomberg to every consumer across the country. He comes with credibility.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So talked a little bit about the housing market. Let's talk about the impact of this environment on your membership. So we talked about low inventory. Low inventory and active listings is what's available on the market today. Homes are moving faster, so transactions are happening. We're not seeing the volume that we saw in 2021 and the beginning of 2022 in our low rate environment. We are seeing some volume. So how is this market impacting your membership, and how are they, zigging and zagging to change their models or adapt to the market we operate in
Yeah.
today?
Well, the one thing I've learned about our members, they're extremely, extremely, extremely resilient. We have, like I said, 1.5 plus million members, but we are expecting that number to trend downward because, we have enough of a history to know over 30 plus years, 40 years, that depending on where home sales are, what the membership will typically do. And with the volume of sales being down in terms of true unit transactions, we'll see an impact on our membership. So, as I said, now we're just north of 1.5 million. I think we may see it get down to maybe the 1.4, maybe the upper 1.3 millions in the next year and a half or 2 years. We've anticipated that. We've budgeted accordingly for that drop. But it's not going to fall off the cliff on those. Some negative folks, in the past said, "Oh, when the pandemic was hit, the membership's going to fall." And by the way, I thought maybe it would fall, in the middle of the pandemic. It went up, and it went up from 1.4 to almost 1.6 million.
Now, was that folks that were, out of a job or in a forced career transition and sought to evaluate a career in real estate, or people looking for like that that second career, like side hustle? Like, why do you think the pandemic propelled a little membership growth?
So my answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
We have seen sometimes when unemployment in general goes up, our membership will go up short term because it may be a transition to this as a career.
Yeah.
Or the normal, well, real estate's easy. I'll just go ahead and get my license and join. And then they realize it's not as easy as they thought. So I think when the pandemic hit, everybody thought everything in the economy was going to just fall apart. During the middle of the pandemic, I think we all saw housing sales went way up.
Yeah.
Everything accelerated. Our membership went up, sales went up, etc. But now that we're in that moderated period, as I had mentioned before, we think it will edge down because our trends have always shown that. So, like I said, we've seen some slight decreases, and I think that will continue over the next year and a half. But I think then, as real estate picks up again and gets into that normal range with inventory and sales, I think that we'll see membership edge back up again. Maybe not to the 1.6 level, but I think it'll stay in that 1.450 to 1.5 billion range over the next 2 years.
Yeah. So we just had our Gathering of Eagles event in June, which attracts some of the top broker owners in the country. And one of my favorite comments from an onstage conversation was, real estate has the lowest bar and lowest barrier to entry, but the highest barrier to success. And that the delta between starting a career in real estate and really winning is really large. And there was a stat in the NAR member profile, the report that just came out, that I thought kind of reiterated that. And one of the stats was that the top 1.5% of real estate agents last year accounted for 65% of sales in America. If you go up to the top 2%, you're at 75% of sales, and you go to the top 10%, you're at 90% of sales. So a very small number of the top real estate professionals in the country do a majority of the transactions. I mean, this just blows the 80-20 rule out of the water. So is that a trend that you see, what's propelling that trend? I have my ideas, but like, tell me about what you think propels
Yeah,
that trend.
I think it's like anything in society today with just transition of how business works as well. Yeah, you mentioned the 80/20 rule. Yeah, I mean there are very strong top producers that do very well. There's very strong brokerages that do very well. But I think the proliferation of teams
Yeah.
changed a lot of what goes on today. I mean, there are some teams today that are bigger than brokerages and continue to grow. And then just the nature of the business itself. There's many different types of players that are in our business, which is wonderful. I will tell you, as the CEO of NAR and our leaders, there are many different business models that many of these folks bring to the table, and that's wonderful because it gives consumers more choices to pick what they think is best. But I think all of those together, like I said, that proliferation of teams and mega teams has changed the nature by how this business runs. And you're right. I mean, the barrier to entry, yeah, you have to be licensed. Yes, you must to be one of our members, abide by our code of ethics. Um, but at the same time, the sky is unlimited with opportunity. And between that and investment opportunity in the commercial real estate space, that's why we see so many members becoming so successful in this business.
All right. So we talked a little bit about how membership may normalize, but on the topic of normalization, let's talk about back to the supply and demand topic. So you used the phrase normal supply. I'd love to hear kind of how you think of that and how you frame out what normal looks like in terms of different demographic trends or whatever might drive that ideal number. And you also mentioned days on market, and we've done a lot of reporting on days on market trends, and I'm just really curious how you think of what healthy is. So
Well,
normalization of supply and healthy days on market.
and I think we all generally use those generic terms in a way because it really is. I'm going to give you the old cliche with real estate being, location, 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 because it depends on the market. Uh, Certain marketplaces, if you look at the top 50 MSAs in this country, they could be very different, between the Northeast, the Southeast, the South, and the West, and the Midwest in terms of what is happening. So normal, and I'm going to sound very much like an economist on this, depends on where you are. Some of those markets, like when they were the hottest a couple of years ago, where like we talked about, where you get multiple offers on a property in the first couple of days. I mean, you would hear stories, 10, 15, 20 contract offers, in the first week. Uh, but in certain parts of the country, you didn't hear about that. And so I think it is a market by market situation. If you look at, I look at, also own a condo in Chicago, and my main home is here on the East Coast. But like in the Chicago marketplace, like in the condo market, when the market was extremely hot, um, it wasn't super hot. In Chicago, it would go up 3, 4, 5%.
Yep.
When the market slowed, it slowed 2, 3, 4% in Chicago. It didn't go way down either. So there's some markets where you would say there's more stability in that, and then in some of the areas like in the Northeast, where you had high appreciation and sales, and then it really went down 15, 20%. So when I say what is normal, I think it depends on where, people that are listening to Housing Wire may be located, because each one will have its own definition, and I think a lot of it deals with employment trends of where people are moving, what companies are doing, employment centers and all that. And all that has shifted, and it's hard to say what normal is anymore, because we have found that when there was the flight from the big cities during COVID, and then that slowness of employers, I would say allowing employees to come back. Many of the employers was dictating, like, I am not coming back. I'm going to be remote, and that has changed the nature of the housing demand depending on where those housing centers are. So I don't think, Clayton, I can give you an answer of what normal means or normal days on market, because I think each marketplace has that own definition. And you take, like we said, housing policy and housing rates, they all have an impact depending on where you live.
I think this is the point in the podcast where we do the obligatory notice that there is not really a national housing market. This is a combination of hundreds of MSAs, and it is a tough part of like covering a national market and you representing a national membership base, is that everybody has their own experiences in the markets that they live and do business in, which is one of the
And
things that makes this market interesting.
it is, and it's the proverbial, as I said, that real estate is local, and what may be hot in one market is not in another. So when we bring our members together and we have these conversations, we'll say we'll hear our members say, "Oh man, it is such a hot market, I can't keep up with it," and we'll have members in other areas saying, "Not at all what I'm experiencing in my marketplace," and they are all very, very different, but I think even more so today than ever before. And I think it'll be interesting to watch economists and historians look at how the pandemic has really impacted a lot of this. I don't think we've been able to really uncover all the dynamics that this has caused, because, like I said, I'll give just people that I know, when the pandemic hit, we didn't know where they were located, when everybody was working remote. And you see the battle now happening between employers and employees, where some employers, some of you see them, they're notable Fortune 50 companies saying, "Damn it, I'm going to require every employee to be back in the office 4 days a week," and then you have employees rebelling, saying, "Good luck."
Yeah, and then like that's the big company like issue, and then like the small company issue like mine. I mean, we have employees, and I got 17 state tax filings to file. Like that's brutal for small organizations.
It is, and we had the same thing over COVID. We had employees that were in different places, and then we've asked our employees that if they're in the DC and Chicago area where our two headquarters are, that they need to be back in the
Yep.
office with some remote flexibility on these things. But I've seen, I just read an article, I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago. Jamie Dimon, Jamie Dimon basically said, remote work isn't for us, and if you want to be remote, then find another place to work. So that battle between employers and employees, but that has impact on housing centers and where people are. And people decided, if I don't have to be in my corporate headquarters, I'm going to go live in a lower cost area or where I'm going to ultimately retire. And that has changed those dynamics quite a bit from those urban centers. So when you talk to realtors in urban centers, they may tell you, it still had, like New York. Yes, it's gotten better than what it was, but it's not anywhere where it used to be. But then I'm hearing these other stories where people are saying, well, now I can afford to live in New York City because some of the housing costs have come down. So I don't know where the shakeout's going to be, but whoever writes the ultimate book on this is going to get very wealthy. So
These rapidly changing local markets is one of the reasons that we invested in Altos Research, where we're bringing local zip code level data to agents, title professionals, loan originators, so they can be informed on what's happening, not just in their state or county, but down to the zip code level where a lot of this movement is happening.
yeah. Well, and it makes sense, Clayton, because if you think about even in the world of politics, in political elections, they've got it down to the zip code and polling place as to impacts of how voters will decide an election. Even on a national basis, they can use zip code level information to say, this is how these precincts are going to end up voting.
Yep.
Well, same thing in the demographics and the buying patterns of housing in each of those zip codes. I think that's where the data is going to really be invaluable, because that'll help decide, where can builders build Where are regulatory impediments keeping people from building? I just talked to my counterpart, the recently retired CEO for the National Association of Home Builders, Jerry Howard, who's been there for years. And Jerry and I were talking at his retirement party just a couple of weeks ago. His comment to me was, with all the building regulations that are going on around the country, we can't, depending on where a particular zip code is, builders can't afford, when they do build, because of all the regulatory and extra costs, they can't afford to build affordable housing. So they were looking at the same thing, which is, where can home builders start to focus in? Because you mentioned it earlier in this podcast, that just suddenly changing some of those things is not going to increase inventory immediately to solve the problem, but understanding the data at that local level and the data at the zip code level is probably more imperative today than it ever has been.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, building in the wrong market, not only a bad business strategy, but also one that doesn't solve the issues that we face as leaders in the housing economy.
Absolutely.
So Bob, I know there's a lot of strategic initiatives and areas you're focused on. And as you look forward to the next 18 months, and I'll remind everybody, you have 18 more months at the National Association of Realtors. This retirement is not official in 2023. You have until the end of 2024 to get some serious things done.
Yeah.
Where are you focusing your energy? What's most important to you that as you look to, put a capstone on this incredible career leading the National Association of Realtors? Where does your energy go?
Well, it's still focused on the areas that I felt were important when I took this job, nearly 7 years ago. And certainly technology has got to be a leading play for us as an association, as for us as an industry, because technology doesn't slow down. When the Industrial Revolution happened, you know, back in the 1800s, it always is happening, and we need to lead the way. And I always say, and my predecessor as CEO Dale Stinton used to say this, if not us, who? Who is going to be the one that leads that? So, my focus over the next 18 months is to continue the initiatives that we started a couple of years ago. That is continuing to look at those technologies that will impact and influence consumers and also our members and our industry. We created this venture a couple of years ago that I used to lead before I became CEO, and I still lead Second Century Ventures and our Reach Accelerator programs. Those are really continuing to go out and find those companies that are upstarts, that are creating ways that the industry are going to change. We invite that. Back in 2017, I remember giving my first speech, at Leadership Summit, and I was setting the course of what I want to accomplish in the technology sector, because technology is going to happen with or without us. And so I felt like then, as I do today, that we as an association, being the largest trade association in the world, need to keep that tent open, where there may be technologies that none of us may like or we might find as a threat, but they're always going to be there. You can't sit there and find ways to thwart them. What you got to do is find ways to embrace them. And so you got to find ways to say, look, you can play the game of we're fearful of disintermediation, or you can play the game of invite folks into the tent and find ways to help make it work so that it betters consumers and it betters our members. So the next 18 months for me will be down that same path. Find those players that can make change happen for the better of our industry, for the better of consumers, because in the end, it's going to happen with or without us. So I want to be the catalyst that says, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of things that may scare us, but all industries need to be scared. That's what makes you better. And so I think there's a lot to accomplish there. I think there's a lot to accomplish in the initiatives that I felt were important as one of the key strategic pillars when I came in 17. and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion in this industry. I made that one of my core plays in 17, and I'm proud to say that we continue to do great things in that area. In our industry, we have a diversity committee that our leadership has embraced. I love what they're doing on this. And at the same time, we've done the same thing here at NAR on my staff. You know, if you're going to talk about it, you got to walk the talk. So, so that commitment to continuing to make sure that, you know, the people that we're bringing in as leaders in this business aren't people that always look like you or me, that they have different backgrounds, different perspectives, look differently, act differently, have different sexual identities. It doesn't matter, because we need to lead the way in real estate, because those are the clients that we serve, and we need to be in the forefront of that. So the next 18 months, I have maybe, as I look at that window closing each month, I put the accelerator down faster to do more things as opposed to trying to slow it down.
I love that mentality. Like they get it done, accelerate into change. Bob, I want to wrap with, you know, kind of one relatively kind of selfish question, but out of support for the realtor ecosystem at HousingWire, RealTrends, and Altos, we do serve a lot of real estate professionals and realtors that are members of the organization. As a media and information company, is there anything that my eyes should be on, anything that I should be doing to help support the real estate profession with information and knowledge?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I think always being, you know, as I said, open and transparent of the issues that are facing this industry. You know, I'm always, you know, I err on the side of what will help make our members successful. But success is measured by how well they serve consumers. You know, this is all about the consumer play. And so I think companies like yourself that are open and transparent, and, you know, look, not all news is great news, you know, and I am not a believer, nor is my leadership, that everything has to be with rose-colored glasses. You have to tell it like it is, so that people know what the reality is. So I think the focus on, you know, holding everybody's feet to the fire to move the industry forward in a positive fashion is what needs to happen. But keeping the consumer front and center. Consumer will always win. And, you know, you've seen it in other professions. You know, you look at what happened to the travel industry, the travel agents. They tried to get very parochial and protective. And when you get protective, you become obsolete. And you have to be the ones that say, if not us, who? Well, you know what? If disintermediation is going to happen, work on doing it yourself and position yourself and your members to be winners in this thing. So, you know, one of the things I think is one of the most crowning achievements when I look back at my career, when I came in as CEO, is that we created an entity called SBIT, or Strategic Business Innovation and Technology Area. And what I wanted to do there, is I still believe today that we still need to do, is talk to all those players that everyone's fearful of. You know, what the hell is Amazon doing? What is Netflix doing? What's Google doing? What's Facebook doing? Oh my God, they're going to replace us. Well, you know what? Then we better be in the forefront of having conversations with every one of those companies and talking about, you know what, we're a big dog too. You know, we're very influential. How do we all work together to advance it, to make it better? And yeah, it will change. So, you know what, holding everyone's feet to the fire to say, you know, when I get asked the question, Clayton, of what are you going to do about this company and what they're trying to change? Wonderful. Bring it on, because we got to figure a way on how to adapt to it. Adaptability is the key, or you become obsolescent. And if you don't sit there and hit it head on. So my biggest thing is I want folks like yourself to say, here's the things that are changing this industry. And you know what, NAR? You're the big dog, as you say, with a lot of members. What are you going to do about it? And I always want to remind people, of the 1.5 million members that we have that serve every zip code in this country, that they're really basically all mom and pop independent little companies. And so it's our job to work with them to help make them successful with consumers. And so trying to thwart and keep things away is not the answer. The answer is embrace technology, and yet it's going to change, and whoever succeeds me is going to have the same opportunity to say, wow, look how different it is today than when Bob Goldberg was CEO. And I'm going to say, look at how it's different today than when Dale Stinton and Terry McDermott were CEOs. That's the challenge that we have, but that's the opportunity. And we better make sure we have people that embrace those changes and can help adapt this industry, because like I said, consumers will lead the way. So we got to be there for them.
Thank you so much for listening to the Housing News Podcast. Please take a few seconds to rate Housing News on Apple Podcasts. It means a lot for the show, and we really do appreciate and listen to your feedback. Also, we're gearing up for HousingWire Annual in October. Please visit housingwire.com/events for full details about our big annual event in Austin, Texas.